We are joined by ACLJ member, former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo on the line. I know we got a lot to talk about, including some of the news that's coming out of, all over the country, it seems like. And it sounds almost ridiculous. It sounds like a movie, but it's real.
No, it is real. And Mike, you and I have talked about it before. And this is that the Communist Party of China is this does sound surreal. Operating police stations in Manhattan.
Hey, Jordan, good to be with you. It sounds crazy, but it is very real. And now they've identified another half a dozen. It wouldn't surprise me if there are even more than that. These operations are being conducted at the direction of the Chinese Communist Party from the mainland. And if you think police stations, think just calling folks in from the local community, almost all of whom are U.S. citizens of Chinese descent. U.S. citizens calling them and saying, hey, we're watching your Aunt Sally back home. How do you think she's doing? Right? They are letting them know that they are monitoring their activity here inside the United States, and they are directing their activities here inside the United States. It is crazy stuff. I'm glad the Biden administration arrested a couple folks, but if it's just a couple folks, they didn't need a whole floor in New York City. There have to be more. We have to take this down in its entirety. Jay, just the same way when we identified a massive spy operation in there, Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas, just in the same way that I directed that the FBI shut that down. They need to close these things out everywhere. We need to make clear to the Chinese Communist Party not only that we're going to shut them down, but we need to impose real costs on them for their operations here inside the gates in the United States.
And I wanted to clear up, this is not just in New York City. These are happening. There are stations that have been identified in New York, Texas, Nebraska, Minnesota, California, all across the country. There are these stations. It is just that New York is where sort of the larger presence is and where the crackdowns are happening.
Yeah, so Mike, this is where we've been talking about this for a long time, and that is the impact of the Chinese Communist Party on global affairs. And of course, you were Secretary of State, you were director of the CIA. But you look at this situation and the way you just described it, and that is this idea that, hey, your aunt in Beijing, we understand she's sick, how's she doing, is messaging to these are Americans that they're talking to, of Chinese origin, is an intimidation factor, an intimidation technique. You directed the CIA.
That's right. This is the objective, and I have watched the Chinese operate here inside the United States. They're going to be very effective at it. They have a massive surveillance state inside of their country to observe what your cousin's doing, what your friend is doing. They know what these folks are doing here in the United States. They're using these operations to follow people around here inside of our country, not some other third country, not inside of China, but here. This is crazy stuff. And, to the extent we just say, gosh, as Secretary Yellen said yesterday, we have to find ways to engage with China, but we don't impose penalties on them when they operate counterintelligence and spying operations inside of our country. If we just do nothing but say, gosh, we arrested a couple folks, I promise you, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, this problem will be even worse. And our sovereignty, America's sovereignty, the ability of American U.S. citizens to live freely and worship here inside the United States in the way that they want, it will be greatly diminished because of the influence the Chinese will continue to impose on Chinese American citizens here inside of our country.
Mike, if you were the Secretary of State now, or President of the United States now, or head Attorney General of the Department of Justice, what would you do with this situation? It took the DOJ a long time to take action here. Now, they may have been taking other action we don't know about, so I want to be fair there. But what would you be doing as a leader of a country, or like when you were Secretary of State, to deal with this forthrightly, quickly, and to get it closed down? What would you do?
So three things come to mind. First, I hope that they've done the work to identify the full scope of what's taking place. So I hope we don't even know how much work they've done. To your point, I'm happy to credit them with operating a good intelligence gathering operation from the FBI, so we know what the scale is. I would then shut it down. I would then tell that story very publicly and very repeatedly. I want every American to know what the Chinese Communist Party is doing to their family, to their community, to the neighborhood, not just those of Chinese ethnicity, but I want every American to know that. And then finally, we should impose real costs on everyone connected to this. So think about the leaders of the National Police Organization that appears was running this. We know who they are. I will guarantee you some of their kids are studying here in the United States. Get them out. I promise you that some of their wives are traveling here to buy stuff at high-end stores in New York City and L.A. and Miami. Get them out. We should impose sanctions on everyone that is connected to this operation to make clear to the Chinese Communist Party that we are not afraid to impose costs on them when they do this kind of thing that violates our sovereignty. We didn't do it, Jay, when they flew a spy balloon over America. We didn't do it when they foisted this virus on the United States, killing over 1 million people. This is another example where China is using propaganda and intelligence and interrogation techniques inside the United States, which has an impact on every American family.
One of the things that, and I want to follow up on this because we've been concerned about this on the university campuses, these cultural centers. If you just scratch the surface, the influence on the CCP as it relates to even things as innocuous as like cultural events in major cities or music and orchestras, it seems like that the leadership, at least the intelligence forces within the Chinese Communist Party, are trying to impact colleges, high schools, kids in the arts, everything. I mean, it just seems to be a very comprehensive approach and they're very patient, a very comprehensive approach that the CCP is taking here.
The scale of this is extraordinary, Jay. Your point's well taken. I remember stories of where the Chinese were showing up at middle school PTA meetings offering $5,000 from a Chinese charitable organization for a swing set. I can assure everyone listening to your show today, they didn't do that for the kids' health. They were making friends. They were conducting influence operations. They were talking about American decline and how we're an evil nation. These are intentional. They are at scale, and they're going to require a response that is equally intentional and equally at scale. And I haven't seen evidence that the Biden administration is prepared to do that. The American people, I pray, are going to demand that they do.
You look at the influence of the CCP in the United States. We're just touching on this, and now I'll add other things. The farmland acquisitions that have taken place, especially near military bases, the spy operations out of consulates. You mentioned you closed one down in Houston, Texas. The police stations we've been talking about, the spy balloon gathering information and signal intelligence as it traversed the entire United States. How far behind is the United States and the current administration how far behind have they fallen in dealing with this?
We're way behind. I can't talk about all of it because some of it that I know remains in classified space, but there is an awful lot of work to do. None of this had been done. This has been going on for a long time. None of this had been done prior to our administration. We began this process. We laid out inside of DOJ with Attorney General Barr an amazing program to counter this. It was good work. It was important work. The FBI was engaged in it, and these guys came in and undid a big piece of that program. I hope they're doing it someplace else quietly. I've just simply seen no evidence of it. It's going to take hard work, years of effort. We can get there. We know it. We're totally capable of responding to intelligence threats inside the United States. We did it when the Soviet Union was spying on us here. The same kind of focus and effort is going to be required, and I hope these folks get it right, because this will, in the end, put every American family at some level of risk, and millions of jobs and billions of dollars of economic wealth will wander back to China in ways that we can't even imagine.
Secretary Pompeo, I just want to have a quick diversion real quick before you wrap up. The administration has tried to blame the current administration, the Trump administration, for the withdrawal from Afghanistan. But the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan told Congress that the State Department isn't cooperating with his oversight role. The question for you is, what does Congress need to do in this situation, knowing all of this is happening?
Well, they need to start bringing in folks who are connected to this, not only folks from the State Department, but there'll be folks from everywhere, and asking them the hard questions. I also saw that they refused to make clear that that the IG made clear that he couldn't determine that money wasn't going to the Taliban. That's bad. If we can't track that money and keep it out of the hands of the Taliban, that's just really dangerous. And it's consistent with the approach in Afghanistan since we had 13 Americans killed there. Look, we know this. We know this administration botched the departure. We now still have work to do to make sure that we protect American interests there and in the region. And I hope the administration will come clean about what it is they're doing, how they're doing it, and put an approach together that is logical for the United States of America.
We appreciate your insight as always and your help on so many of these key issues. Again, Mike Pompeo is the Senior Counsel for Global Affairs for the ACLJ, but also former Secretary of State and former Director of the CIA.